My name is Claire, and I'm 25 years old. After finishing junior college, I got a job at a department store where I still work today. That's where I met my husband, John. When I first started at the store, John was working at the main office, and he was in charge of training new employees. He seemed serious and strict at first. He always kept a close eye on us, and whenever he walked by, I felt nervous. But when it came to work, John was amazing. He knew his job well and gave perfect instructions. He was really good at teaching, and I learned a lot from him. I thought of him as a reliable boss, even though we didn't seem to connect personally at first. I never imagined we'd end up married. One day, I made a big mistake at work that caused a huge loss for the company. I was only 20 at the time and didn't know how to handle such a big failure. I thought quitting was the only way to make up for it. John came to my rescue. He showed up at my house while I was taking a break from work and encouraged me. "You're still new here, so it's normal to worry. That's what I'm here for, to help you grow. A person who doesn't fail can't learn or get stronger. I'll take responsibility for you. Don't let this stop you. Get back on your feet and do your job with pride." I broke down in tears. Thanks to John's kind words, I was able to return to work. From that day on, I started seeing him as more than just my boss. I worked hard to improve and earn his respect. Seeing me try so hard, John praised me in front of everyone, and it made me even more motivated. Within 2 years, I became the top performer at the store. I spent more time working closely with John, and we got to know each other better. Eventually, he told me he had feelings for me, and we started dating. 3 years later, he proposed, and we got married. I never expected to marry John, but life works in surprising ways. After getting married, we bought our first house together with a mortgage loan. Since we both worked at a big department store, we were able to get approved for the loan and purchase the home. We were so happy with our new house, and everyone at work said we were the perfect couple. They even joked about being jealous of us. We were happy to hear that, but it also made us want to set a good example. So we put extra effort into our work, and things went really well. Then, last year, I found out I was pregnant. I was so happy. I had the loving husband I always wanted, and now we're going to have a child. I felt like everything in my life was perfect, but there was one problem: my job. I had been working at the department store for 5 years, and I had just been promoted to store manager. It was an important job, so I wondered if I should quit to focus on the pregnancy. I felt guilty about it. My morning sickness was getting worse, and I was running out of time to decide. I talked to John, and we agreed that it would be best for me to leave my job. I felt bad about it, but John reassured me. "I'll handle everything. I'll work extra hard and make more money. You don't have to worry about anything. Just focus on the pregnancy." His words took the weight off my shoulders, and I could relax and look forward to our baby. A little while later, I had to be hospitalized. Normally, it wouldn't have been necessary, but my pregnancy symptoms were very severe, and the doctors wanted to keep an eye on me. I spent a lot of time alone in the hospital, which was pretty lonely, but John came to visit me every day, even though he was really busy, and that made me feel better. After about 3 months, I was finally allowed to go home. John took a day off from work to pick me up, and we drove back together. It felt nice to be home after such a long time. The house seemed a little different after being away for so long. It felt a bit strange, and after looking around for a bit, I noticed something. All of my things that had been in the living room were moved to my bedroom. I asked John about it, but he just seemed uncomfortable and didn't give me a clear answer. While I was wondering why he was acting like that, the doorbell rang. I thought, who could it be at this time? When I opened the door, I was surprised to see my mother-in-law, Margaret. I had just come back from the hospital and was hoping to spend some time alone with John, but I couldn't turn her away. Margaret walked in like it was her own house, not even greeting me. She only noticed me when I walked in from the door and said, "Oh, what are you doing out of the hospital? I didn't know you were back." I apologized for not telling her sooner, and she replied with a bored look, "You could have stayed in the hospital longer." Then she made herself comfortable in the living room. I went over to John and asked, "Why is she here?" John didn't seem to understand why I was confused and just said, "Oh, my mom has been coming over a lot lately." I was frustrated, so I decided to ask Margaret directly. "Margaret, I just got out of the hospital, so I'd like to spend today with John. Could you excuse me?" She looked at me and said, I just got here, and you want me to leave now? You act like this is your house. That irritated me. This was my house. John and I had bought it together. Margaret must have seen me frown because she added, "What's that look for? This is your house, but it's also ours. Do you understand?" I was confused and didn't understand what she meant, so I asked, "What do you mean?" She scoffed and said, "How can you be so clueless? This house was bought by my son, and since he's part of my family, it's ours too. Now do you get it?" Her explanation didn't make sense to me, and I wanted to say something back, but I didn't know what to say at first. When I tried to argue back, John interrupted me and said, "Don't complain about my mom. She's the one who's been taking care of everything while you were in the hospital," and started blaming me instead. I didn't say anything more, even though I wasn't happy with what they said. I didn't want to get sick again and end up back in the hospital, and I knew that Margaret had been helping John while I was gone. After that, Margaret kept coming to our house every day to do chores. I didn't like it, but I decided not to say anything because by the time I reached my last month of pregnancy, I would need to rest more, and I have to let Margaret help with the housework. It was stressful having her there all the time, but finally, when I was about to be hospitalized again, I thought I'd be free from the situation. One day, as I was getting ready to go to the hospital, Margaret arrived earlier than usual. When I opened the door, I was shocked. Margaret stood there with a car full of luggage behind her. "What's all this luggage for, Margaret?" I asked. She replied tiredly, "It's our stuff to move in here." I rushed into the living room where John was and asked, "What's going on? I didn't hear anything about this." I raised my voice and asked again, "Wait, did you say your mom and family are moving in?" Before John could answer, Margaret butted in. "My oldest daughter's family and I are all moving in here to live with you. It's already decided, so don't make a fuss." John agreed with his mother and told me sternly, "That's how it is, so don't go against my mom." I couldn't believe it. Trembling, I asked John, "Why did you make such a big decision without telling me?" Margaret shouted, "I told you already. This is our son's house, so it's our house too," and raised her voice at me. I was getting really angry, so I told her, "Please be quiet, Margaret. I'm talking to my husband." Margaret didn't expect me to speak up like that, so she went quiet. I took the chance to talk to John. "What's going on? Why are they all moving in with us? We're going to have a baby next month. You said this house was for us to be a family, didn't you?" John's response shocked me. "What's the problem? My mom and sister are my family. It'll be more lively with everyone here. You think it's fun because you're related to them. But for me, they're strangers. 4 people I don't know are suddenly moving in. How am I supposed to enjoy that?" John snapped, "This is my house. What's wrong with me having my family here? You and I bought this place together, so it's not just your decision." In the end, we both stood our ground. I knew John was close to his family, but this was beyond what I expected. I realized just how much of a mama's boy he was, and I lost all confidence in our marriage. I made up my mind and said to him, "Fine, if you want to live with your mom and sister and her family, I won't stop you. But I'm leaving." I quickly went to the town office to get divorce papers. I came back home, stood in front of John, and handed him the papers. "I can't do this anymore. Let's get a divorce." John was shocked. He hadn't expected me to ask for a divorce. He stood frozen, looking at the papers for a few seconds. Then, with a smug look, he said, "What are you going to do after we get divorced? How will you support your child if you don't even have a job?" He looked at me like he was satisfied with what he'd said. His smug expression reminded me of Margaret, which only made me more furious. "Just sign the divorce papers." John laughed at my anger and signed the divorce papers. "Are you sure about this? We're getting a divorce, but you'll be the one in trouble." "Right." He signed them, and now it was my turn to stand strong. "Hey, aren't you forgetting something important? My dad owns an apartment rental business." "Oh, that means I don't have to worry about finding a place to live. Plus, I'll get child support from you." Oh, and if you or your family keep living in this house, you'll have to pay me half of its value." John finally realized the situation he was in. His face went pale as he looked at me. "Well, I guess we won't see each other again. Take care. I'll contact you through my lawyer from now on." John was in shock, sitting there. Margaret, who had been listening, seemed to understand that John would have to pay a lot of money. She froze with packages in her hands. I ignored them both and left the house. After that, the divorce was finalized, including property division and everything. My dad let me live in one of his nicer spare rooms just for me and my child. Thanks to the money from the divorce, I didn't need to work after the baby was born, which meant I could spend lots of time with my little one. The baby was so sweet, and I enjoyed every moment with him. As for John, I heard an interesting story from a former colleague at my old department store. Apparently, John had been living in the house with Margaret and his sister's family, but things weren't going well. His sister's kids were noisy, and both Margaret and his sister were spending too much money, which caused a lot of stress. John was also tired from work and became really depressed. He started making mistakes at work and was eventually moved to a department with little work to do. To make things worse, the pay in that department was lower, and his life got even harder. He deserved all of it. On the other hand, after 2 years of spending time with my child, I got a job at another major department store because of the experience I gained. The pay was about the same, but I could finish work earlier, so I had no problem picking up my child. Now I'm working hard and doing my best to raise my wonderful child. I'm proud of myself for deciding to divorce John because I realized I could raise my child on my own without him. Thanks for watching until the end. Please subscribe to our channel. See you in the next video.